This session, we are going to discuss a topic that educators across the board have quite strong opinions about, and that's assessments. Ultimately, as a teacher, as we prevent any new information, this question will eventually bleed into our minds. How will I know if students understand the vocabulary that I'm teaching? So anytime that we talk about assessments, vocabulary included, we want our assessment to match our goals. Now, normally I wouldn't assess vocabulary because vocabulary understanding already gets measured through other assessments, such as our students understanding our content or whether or not our student can explain the content from our courses using the vocabulary appropriate, either orally or in writing, or when we see students use words with understandings in other settings, such as vocabulary sorts. But there are times where you may want to formally assess a student's understanding of words. And for those times, there are different options that you can use. Remember what we said, assessments should match your goals. So if you want to measure if a student has a surface level understanding of definitions or simple word uses, these would be the assessments for you. So the first are multiple choice questions where students have to pick out the definition, multiple choice questions where students have to select the correct usage of a word, or true or false questions that do the same thing. So the problem with these type of questions are twofold. One, they're easy to guess, ranging from, a 25% chance with a multiple choice to a 50-50 chance of guessing correctly. And two, these questions don't demonstrate students' ability to use the word in context or the nuance of word knowledge. They only measure surface understanding. Another surface level measure of understanding that has slightly more depth, even though it's still 50-50, is to have students label uses of words as either being an example or a non-example, such as the one you see on the screen. So you could provide multiple examples or multiple non-examples to make it less of a coin flip. Once again, remember, assessments should match our goals. So there are a variety of formats that can be used to assess deeper levels of word knowledge. If we want students to use what they know about the word to evaluate contexts and uses of the word, then we might consider a few of these strategies. So we could have students create examples using words across different contexts. So, tell us about a time that you were perplexed. Or you could have students and ask students to describe what is alike and or different for pairs of words that are semantically pretty similar, such as the word, exotic and unique. If your goal is to measure how well students can apply a word's meaning to their understanding and the context of its use, then you might use the following question type. So, Mary thought that Jim was ridiculing her when he said that the cake she made looked beautiful. How do you think Mary thought her cake looked? Or an even more nuanced scene used in the second example. So in responding to the context of this task, students need to use knowledge of the words to draw an inference in order to make sense of the context. So this task is inherently much more challenging and can be made more or less so depending on whether the context given shows typical or not so typical uses for the target word. Remember what we said, assessments should match your instructional goals. So if you want to track if students are absorbing new vocabulary into their language, you can print out a roster and you can track when students are using the words and in what context. This is probably the most appropriate assessment tool to measure if students are beginning to transfer words into their Tier 1 everyday vocabulary. And remember, you can continue to offer ways inside your classroom to bring up the words you're introducing even after you covered them in class. So you can assign homework to look for those words being used outside of school settings. You can revisit vocabulary sorts after a unit, and you could create word walls and keep vocabulary visible. So your goal this session is relevant to you, your opinions, and your classroom needs. So ask yourself, what is your opinion about formally assessing vocabulary? Is it something you plan on doing in your own classroom? And part 2, if you choose to formally assess vocabulary, your assessments should match your goals. So which assessment type or style out of the ones that we discussed would you choose for your own classroom?